Okay. Oh, as usual, just letting you know what I'm going to do before I do it. We'll do a little prayer of gratitude, then a brief review of what is energy healing, then a brief review of some of the points, important and main points covered from yesterday's session, and then we'll dive into today's session. We'll take off. Oh, and I'd like to just add that last night there was a really fabulous question that came in, and I intended to answer it last night and I didn't, and I thought it might be a good launching point for today's session. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start today. After we do our prayer and review, I'll start with that question, and then we'll do the other questions that came in too at the end. Thank you to the source of creation for being all of us, our healing collective, for being this webinar, this live webinar on remembering and owning our cosmic origins. Thank you for the ancestors' contribution to our human experience by providing the foundation for the physiology. Thank you to the bridge, the eternal bridge between the absolute and the relative, the connection, and all the technologies by which we leverage that connection. Speech, for instance. Thank you for speech. Thank you for all of this. In today's webinar, may we activate and enliven the memory and connection between ourselves and our cosmic origins, and then integrate that connection through our healing work. May everyone who's participating in today's webinar come away with a more stabilized cosmic connection, or I'd say connection to their own cosmic root or source. All right, thank you everyone. What is energy healing? Energy healing is a technology of consciousness. Essentially, it is the developed understanding of the way our consciousness affects our physiology. The principles of energy healing are that we focus attention in an intelligent manner, in a specific manner, in order to activate the foundation of the physical form in desired ways, particularly to support the expression of divine being at the surface. So we know the source of creation, divine being, is sitting in the unmanifest, quality-less, silent field. It is the silent field of self. But one of our great activities in the human form is to express that divinity, which is quality-less and silent and unmanifest, in the field of the manifest. It sounds like an impossibility, but the reality is that really everything is that source. And it's just the relative is just more and more concentrated forms of source energy, essentially. However, that being said, in the human condition, we still face challenges. And because life still brings challenges, it is necessary to utilize a technology. This energy healing is one of many, I would assume, many, I know there are many, ways of supporting a more perfect and complete expression of source at the relative level of creation, thus uplifting life for oneself and for all of others, all the creation, all the universe. That's energy healing in a nutshell. All right. Now the review of yesterday's session. From my perspective, one of the most important elements of yesterday's session was recognizing and appreciating the nature of thought, if we want to call it thought, as it manifests in the brainstem. And the reason is that we think thoughts, like when we think, the traditional definition of thought is like a thought made out of words in your brain. But we know that that happens in actually rather specific areas of the brain are devoted to creating language, but principally the type of thinking that goes on in the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, is like that. It's like thoughts, concrete thoughts. You can call them concrete thoughts. The limbic system is responsible. Now, limbic system, when I say limbic system, I mean more like the inner brain area. Like you've got the cortices of the brain on the outside, then you've got this inner area of the brain, which is devoted to feeling, essentially. So we can say that emotions, when we process emotions, these are a little deeper level of expression of intelligence, more abstract level of expression of intelligence. But then there's the brainstem. And it's interesting that in yesterday's session, we did an exercise for activating and enlivening the intelligence in the brainstem. And I was reviewing that last night. So as part of our review, I wanted to add one little thing, which is if we breathe through our noses, what happens is the air, we did some healing with the elements yesterday, just saying, speaking of air, and when I say elements, I mean the 5 elements: air, space, air, fire, water, and earth, as in those elements. The air passes into the nasal passages, and it goes down into the lungs, and it passes right past that area, that brainstem area, which is just behind the throat, essentially. Just behind the mouth, the nasal area, and the throat. So it's back in that area. And what I found was that the air has an enlivening effect when attention is already on the brainstem. So I thought we would just take a moment. This is kind of like step 2 of yesterday's exercise. Step 1 of yesterday's exercise was attention on the brainstem. Step 2, we're just going to quietly take a moment, allow awareness or attention to be in that area of the nervous system, which is just behind the sinuses, mouth, and throat. And breathe through the nose. And notice how the air supports the awakening of this area of our nervous system. Bless you. You can, it feels as if it's bringing lightness, because air is naturally light. It's bringing lightness to that area, yes? Can you feel it? The air is full of prana. Hi. The air is full of prana. It's full of life force. It's full of that quality-less divine being. So when we breathe in through our noses, that quality, that life force that's in the air adds to the consciousness of our being that's going into the brainstem and awakens it even further. So simple. You can do this anytime. The implications of awakening this part of the brain are huge, because the brainstem area, and when I talk about that, I'm also referencing into part of the limbic system, into the 4th and 3rd ventricle of the brain, where many of the regulating organs for the autonomic functionings in the body reside. So organs that do things like regulate appetite, or the hypothalamus, which is basically monitoring everything that goes on inside the body, and is an administrator. It like gives the orders to the pituitary and other administrative organs so that the immune system and the endocrine system and the digestive system and the circulatory system and all these systems that we think of as systems of our body, which are on automatic and we don't have any control over them. You see what I'm saying? The implications for awakening awareness of the way our consciousness or creative intelligence moves through the brainstem area provides access for consciously promoting impulses of intelligence, which will positively impact even aspects of the autonomic nervous system. We've grown up in a world where the body is considered quite a mystery, and most of the functions of the body outside the range of our autonomy, access, or control. But ever since I was a child, I remember hearing stories about yogis in India who could like stop their blood from flowing and things like that. And I was just like, oh, that's just so unusual and one of a kind type of situation. No, it actually isn't. This is how it's done. This is how it's done. Access to the area of the brain that controls that part of the body is awakened. So that was part of the review from yesterday. Another thing that happened was, as we started to do that exercise yesterday, I noticed that there was an interesting connection between that area of the brain and this second and third chakra area. And it's really interesting that that came up because, you know, a lot of things come up in these webinars that I do not anticipate. And there was a question that came up today that was related to that. So I think this is actually an appropriate time to answer that question. Then I'll promise I'll answer the other question too. Okay, I'm saving treats for you guys because a lot of the questions are quite yummy. They're really sweet. She says she's always associated cosmic energy with the Hara, H-A-R-A, and specifically and please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing this right. I think it's a Chinese term. Tant Tien, did I pronounce that right? Tant Tien? 2 inches below the navel in the center in front of the sacrum. Isn't that interesting? So that's where we were looking at all that creative energy yesterday. It's so interesting. One of her somatic teachers taught that this area originates in the body when the sperm and egg coming together form the yolk sac, which is nourished by cosmic energy for the first few days before attaching to the uterine wall. I assume she's referring to the placenta there, because the placenta attaches to the uterine wall. So when our attention goes to that place, we feel the cosmos inside us. The basis of Hara meditations. When I put my attention on the brainstem tonight, it seemed to echo in the Hara. Yeah, I experienced that too. It's beautiful. And one of the participants mentioned the gut and the microbiome. And when my attention went to the brainstem, it also seemed to activate the cranial sacral pump and the flow of cranial sacral fluid up the spine. Yes, and that, thank you. Thank you for this awesome question. So the interesting thing about the breath is that our breath is actually the mechanical function that pushes cranial sacral fluid up and down the spine. So that's why I found it very interesting. And it was by the grace of my being able to be in your presence that this emerged. That after the webinar, I realized that there was this connection between the breath and putting attention on the brainstem. And she mentions here about the cranial sacral fluid and how important that is. And it's true, because that is what allows the flow of consciousness to go up and down. The consciousness follows, right? Or I would say the the cranial sacral fluid follows the flow of consciousness from what we would think of as the relative material level of creation up into the absolute level of silent source, and then back to the material. And this part of the nervous system is a metaphor for the collapse and expansion of consciousness from the relative into the absolute, and then back to the relative again. And I've talked about that divine dialogue being the foundation for all the different systems of the body. So here again, we see it in terms of the nervous system, the flow of absolute being into the relative field of creation, right? The movement of nerve energy out into the relative, and then the return to the brain where it's processed. So move out toward the relative, and then in toward the absolute. And it's a metaphor for that, but the fact that that cycle is taking place constantly in the field of creation is the basic structure. It's like the unit upon which all the different systems of the body are formed. And so our body systems reflect that pattern. And that brings me to another question. I hope you don't mind. I'm using questions a lot today, but I like the questions that came in, and yeah, it's so meaningful. Although I'm not sure I'm finding that other question. Yes, actually I am. This was the question I wanted to share with you last night. So she says, "Dear Dorothy, I'm a newbie, but I love you and your wonderful healing sessions. So sweet. More than anything else, I long to embrace and connect with my cosmic self as a means to uplift and glorify our beautiful planet, Earth, and all of creation, all the way back to source, to glorify divine being, both through myself, through my own self-healing, and the ability to perform Dharma, but also directly in the field of being. While I'm able to experience occasional random connectedness with cosmic self, a lifetime of injuries and exposure to toxins and other toxic influences have destroyed my ability to transcend thought as a means to refine and culture my physiology, to sustain that connection permanently, to deepen it and to open it wider. Can you please help me and others who may have such problems?" I brought this question. First of all, it's so beautifully worded. You can just hear the refinement and sweetness and loveliness of the person who wrote that question in her words. What an angel. But the reason I brought that question now is when I was really thinking about the question, the point that came up was that every particle of creation is infused with being. So being, or the transcendent, is present in every particle and every bit of ourselves and of our environment. In a sense, it's not that we have to connect to it, it's that we are it already naturally, even if we don't know it. So that was the first thought that rose, was that there's no path to connecting to being because all this is being. But that said, if there's, to honor the experience that, yes, there's being, but there also seems to be suffering, we're looking at two things here. The first thing is this lady, and also others of us who find ourselves in situations where the connection to the source of creation isn't easy, have either in this lifetime or in the past spent sufficient time consciously connecting to source. And I know this lady, I've known her for many decades, and she's been practicing mental techniques for transcending for decades. So we know that part of the story, which is that forging that pathway of connection already exists, but it's the integration. It's the integration that comes up for question when we find ourselves in a suffering situation. And this also ties in a bit with yesterday's session, because I think we talked for a while yesterday about meeting challenging situations. So, did some healings for that. When the challenging situations come up, they arise as if they are barriers to the full expression of divinity. They appear to be like walls sitting between us and the fulfillment of our desires. It slows down the process of further expansion of consciousness, which makes a person feel like they're not even evolving, and it slows down the path to the attainment of desires. What then ensues is the process of integration. Because we're never really very far from being, there's always a bit of it accessible somewhere. For instance, I do have other clients who are suffering from different types of mold infections and things like that. And even in those conditions and states, still one falls asleep at night. And even if sleep is not beautiful or perfect or super deep, there's still that process in the night of transcending between the three different main states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and sleeping. And it's literally not possible to go from waking, dreaming to sleeping or back and forth between any of those without going through the gap first. In fact, it's not even possible to breathe, because the transcendent is in the gap between the in and out breaths. So as long as we're breathing, we actually are transcending, but it's just so fine. It's just such a fraction of a little fraction of a second that the mind says, I'm not transcending. I think I missed something there. This is why we activate the brainstem. Because the intelligence in the brainstem is so abstract. Our intelligence, our how do we want to say, like the roots, we could say the roots of the intellect. The intellect is all up here, right? Prefrontal cortex is analyzing and synthesizing and doing all these fancy mental gymnastics, math and things like that. But the brainstem is an earlier point in that process. And it analyzes and synthesizes at a very, I don't want to use the word abstract again, but first of all, quickly. So fractions of a second a second experience can be logged, can be understood at that level of being, of our physiologies. When we access the autonomic nervous system, we're accessing activities that are taking place at, for example, cellular levels in the body, and even molecular levels, such as the production of enzymes and proteins and hormones. These are molecules. Access to the intelligence of the autonomic nervous system. I'd say the control station for the autonomic nervous system, allows us to think very quickly and to honor and recognize and appreciate those brief moments where the transcendence slips in, where the unmanifest silence of being slides into experience. And when those moments are recognized and appreciated, they become accessible. They shine like a light, like a little dot. Where's that start? Like a little dot in the darkness of I'm not transcending anywhere, but there's just this little spot. And even if there's just one little spot, that one little spot is enough to open up the floodgates. So this was, I think, another really important point from yesterday was the relationship between the human state and condition and the entire cosmic intelligence of creation. We think of ourselves as so insignificant as human beings, but we're not insignificant. In fact, it is our ability to focus attention and to be a sensitive tip of the antenna that picks up the information, that views this amazing universe and understands it in the way humans understand it, that glorifies the manifestation or expression of divinity. Divine being has been like making the cosmos for billions of years, right? And yet having human physiologies that support, it's as if we stand as a kind of a bridge between the silent source of creation that's behind the manifesting process and being able to bring the glory of the manifest relative back to source. Because we look out into the creation and we absorb all this information from our universe, which is, point from yesterday, our larger body, right? The whole universe is really our self. It's really divine self permeating and soaking through everything, right? Through every particle of creation. So the nature of the human nervous system that allows us to focus attention the way we do and to go out and look and identify and appreciate and recognize what's going on at a universal level or in the environment anywhere, even in our internal environment, it's like that creates the connection between the expressed and the inexpressed, or the expressed and the unexpressed. You can say unexpressed. Because attention is being. So when we shine our attention, and this is the foundation of energy healing, folks, right? We shine our attention into a specific area of creation, and that attention flow is the flow of infinite being. It is divine being flowing. And we have autonomy over how and where and how much and what angle it comes in to the process. And by utilizing that ability in an intelligent manner, the flow of divine being that comes as our attention into any area of creation promotes it can promote increase of divine expression or decrease of divine expression, or may have a neutral effect. So maybe the word either should have been any of, because it's three different things. It can either go in and not touch it. It just goes in like completely silent like that. Or it can promote blossoming of divine expression, or it can break down. And we talked yesterday a lot about those laws of nature that are responsible for deterioration or destruction, which is also part of the evolutionary process. There was also a lot of big healing for the heart yesterday. And the healing for the heart was so poignant and so tender for me about 24 hours before the webinar began. It was so powerful. And I realized that divine expression, we could say through Dharma, which is our responsibility or our duty, or it's also sometimes, I think, referenced as one's station, one's role in life, one's service, the kind of service we perform, includes souls, includes individuals who consciously didn't want to look at chaos and negativity. So as souls are evolving, there's that realization, oh, there's this range, there's a spectrum between order and chaos, essentially. There's like the lighter, brighter, more angelic, more sweet, soft level of creation, that level of creation that we in our Western world have identified as like angels and devas or fairies or any kind of soft little sweet, me. I don't see those as separate, right? Those are just expressions of self. But there's the opposite of that, which are more like demonic type of sinister energies. And what happens is as soon as a person their fine perception starts to awaken to that level of creation where you can actually see those laws of nature in motion, see them interacting with each other and recognize them, almost always the first response is, well, I just want to hang out with the angels. Never mind those more darker energies, right? It's a natural response. It's just a natural reaction. However, the nature of creation is holistic. That means like all the laws of nature are included. We have to be inclusive. So what happens is when a soul hangs out in that more angelic realm for a really long time, they sort of lose or do not develop the skill set required to work in a wise and enlightened manner with the darker energies. They lose that ability. And then what can happen is they have to come back into a lifetime where they have to really go into their dark side. And they have to explore that whole area. And usually, if that soul had been staying in the light, we call it the light. But you have to understand, it's all light. There's only consciousness. There's only divine being everywhere. This was another point from yesterday, is we're going to start giving different names to that, like darkness or dark side. We're going to start giving different names because when it is handled intelligently, it supports evolution. That's a really important point. When it is handled intelligently, it supports evolution too. I remember hearing when I was being made a meditation teacher, my teacher said, for an enlightened man, even the destructive laws of nature work in his favor. I remember that quote stood out to me. I'm like, ooh, that's good stuff, right? Because we know those laws of nature are there. Look, see, lights and darks and everything, right? And it wouldn't be so beautiful if it didn't also have the dark parts for contrast, right? So it all is part of the story. But the thing is that there's this natural human, and I think it's because of the compassion of the human soul, that people just want to stay in the soft stuff. We just want to stay in the easy, fun, happy, magical, happy fairy stuff. We just want to play in fairy dust. We want to bathe in fairy dust all day. So the result is that the skill sets required to handle those other energies, which are great teachers, which are great resources of like energy, great resources of particular types of like powerful energies. Everybody knows dark feelings are very powerful, right? Everybody knows when anger crops up or fear crops up, it's like, whoa, it's like a big energy boost comes in, right? Yeah, but we have to work with it in an intelligent manner in order for it to support ourselves and support everyone else and essentially allow divine expression to come to the surface. That's why those energies come up, because whatever's we're facing at that moment requires that extra boost. So for the lady with the toxins, this very intense physical, like hampering of her physical body as a result of injuries and toxins, has provided a format for her to awaken to feelings in the heart which are less pleasant. When those feelings are there, The trick is to witness them. Know that the act of witnessing the negative feeling, which one basically feels in one's own heart, even if, say, you're in a situation and somebody's being mean or something, and you can say, oh, it's their fault. What I'm feeling is their negativity. If you're feeling it, it means it's reflecting off of something right here. So that's just the way, right? So, right now, hands raised, bless you. So, so what that means is it's a gift. It's a gift, right? Like this person did this thing that was so offensive or whatever. But the gift is that, oh, it showed me something that was hiding in here, which I need to shine the light of my awareness upon that thing, that feeling, that dark emotion, because the shining of the light draws it into the source of creation. It draws it back to being. It draws it into the silent ocean of self, where it can be reformed. It can be reset as a useful tool, as a useful tool. The trick is not getting gripped. That's a trick. They're habits, they're old habits of being sort of caught, like especially if it's dynamic, you know, like in the case of this lady with the toxins, that's like deep in her body. It's in her physical body. So it's not like she can ever escape or run away or, you know, until she's able to purify all those toxins out. It's going to be something that she's living with on a 24/7 basis. But the physical toxins in the body are showing, they're like a shadow, and they're showing where the origin of the light resides in the being. The light, oh, thank you, sweetie. Yeah, that's a good question. So a good question has come up, and I think this question probably reflects other questions also coming up. Oh yes, I love it, you guys. So the question that just came to me is, how do we witness it immediately? How are we, because when difficult situations come up, they can be so gripping. I love the question. We actually looked at it a little bit yesterday. This exercise that we started out in today's session, where we bring a lot of awareness into the brainstem. We wake up the brainstem. This area of our system is a pre-gripped position. So by the time the feeling moves up into the limbic system and it gets up into the cortices, where we're analyzing and synthesizing, at that point it's easier to be gripped. But when it's still in the brainstem, at that level, there's no discriminating like good or bad, or it's okay or it's not okay. It just is. It just is. The way the intelligence understands reality, or one's own impulses of intelligence at that level, it's just kind of a state of amness, or just pure being of it. So allowing awareness, take a breath through your nose and let that breath go back into the brainstem, and that'll center awareness back into this deep center of self, of the head. And it will allow you to bypass the belief systems, which are ultimately responsible for us being gripped by the negativity of situations. I remember being present for my father when he died. I got to sit by his bed. My belief systems told me that this was a terrible time, and this was a time of great suffering. However, I closed my eyes and meditated, of course, with him as he left his body. And what I saw was the most beautiful of the beautiful. To this day, like more beautiful than this. I mean, to this day, I think back on that moment, and the beauty that I saw in that moment was indescribable. It was indescribable. The whole lifetime contained in a single glance, right? Because once it finishes, then you see it as a package. The whole human lifetime, pure expression of divine being, pure divinity expressed. Even in the moments where he wasn't happy or something, whatever, even in moments that he might look back and think, oh, I could have done better or whatever, it doesn't matter, because in that encapsulation of infinity within the constraints of time, that was an expression of being. That was being finding its way all the way to the surface. And let me tell you, so beautiful, the eternal soul. Oh, beyond beautiful, the most wonderful. So just letting that soak in a little bit. We're just letting that recognition of ourselves in that context as well soak in a little bit. This is a second layer of healing for the heart. Did a lot of heart healing yesterday. Because ultimately the ability to expand our consciousness in order to fully remember the whole story of our cosmic origins and then own that requires expansion, an overall expansion of consciousness and an integration of that expansion. And the administrative center is actually, much of the administrative center is here in the heart, including the structures that allow us to remember along a spectrum of energetic frequency where our cosmic origins are. Let's see if I can say that a little more concisely or a little more accessibly. Our brains are these beautiful developed structures that have evolved through, millions of years of evolution on Earth, for those of you who believe in evolution. And they're really incredible tools. The brain is an incredible tool. And so is the heart. But the nature of the heart's memory capacity is much more anchored in feeling than the brain's memory capacity. Like the types of neural connections that we make that support memory in our brains is different from the types of neural connections that the neural network of the heart uses to remember. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So the principle here is that it's a feeling memory. It's a memory of feeling. So just that all by itself, we're just letting that kind of sink in for a minute, because it's the justification for why the work that we're doing in this webinar involves. Yesterday, this was like one of the main things that happened yesterday, was a clearing and opening of a connection, a thread through the channel, the hora line, right? The central cord of light that runs through the body to the center of cosmic self, which would be the center sun. And I'm just using that word center sun. I picked it up off the internet and I'm using it in my own way. I'm not sure if I'm using it the way it was originally, but for me, it represents the center of the Hiranyagarbha, or the egg of the universe. Hiranyagarbha, that's a Vedic term. It means like the universe is like a golden egg. If you like zoom out, it's like a big golden egg. So that connection is where we find our cosmic origins. And that connection goes right into, my friend was saying, also down in the navel area, but it goes into the cord, which runs all the way through the body, supporting particularly expansion in the heart area. And the heart, I'm calling now the energy center of the heart, which includes the heart chakra, the heart Maha, the heart itself, and other organs that are up in the chest, such as the respiratory system and the thymus, even up into the throat area and down into the organs of the upper digestion. That whole area is the heart energy center, that kind of middle of the body energy center, right? And what appears to be happening is just the softest, most luscious sphere of energy in this area, in this heart area, very light, like a light bulb, open, lighting up. But that sphere of energy is a matrix of sorts, but it's so fine. That sphere, you know, the matrices, I've talked about them before, are made up of the threads of the astral field, right? But we know that the finest level of the astral field, just before you get into the causal field, is so, the threads become so fine, they're like fabric. So this matrix, I've never seen this matrix before, but bless you all, for bless us as our healing, the power, our power to do energy healing, evolving this matrix, which is a matrix whose threads are so fine, it looks more like a sphere of fabric than it does like a sphere with individual threads. And it's sitting just right around the whole chest area. And it's creating something that looks like a light node, like a node lit up, right, from within itself. And that light in that node is the light from the center sun. It acts like a kind of a magnet or something to just draw in that center sun energy and just stabilize it there in the center of it's a big center of our bodies, right? If we take this much of the body and then what's left, there's not that much left, right? So big center of our body. There is the fineness of those threads is able to honor totality. It's able to honor the entire range of all the laws of nature. So that the wisdom that we have access to from our heart center area, our heart energy center, is a resource that allows us to address any situation. It allows us to cope. Now, in the case of Our Lady, I keep coming back to our beautiful lady with the toxins, because those toxins have specific energy frequencies. There are what I call energy signatures associated with the toxins in the body. And those energy signatures are born of specific laws of nature. And those laws of nature are being leveraged now to integrate the pure consciousness that she had experienced for years and years and years. She had so devotedly, so dedicatedly, day after day, twice a day, or sometimes probably 3 times a day or 4 times a day, taking those deep meditative dives into the source of her own consciousness. And all that is not lost. It's only covered by the energy signature of the toxins. So what the covering is doing is it's providing a context for integration. That means that those fine experiences are integrating at a very abstract level. You could say under the toxins. So there's that dive into the source of being, and then the toxins come in, and that energy signature is sitting up at like looks like it's sitting at an emotional and mental level of the physiology. So here is the toxin signature, and down here is where the integration is going on. So this is a foundation. This is your divine being. This is your eternal soul saying, oh, you know, in order to really own the richness and depth of my decades of meditation, I need to stabilize a foundation at the deepest level, at that really abstract level, without distractions. So what happens is the distractions sit up here in the mental and emotional level, also etheric, seeing it there. Okay, so all four, sorry, keep looking, keep seeing, all four of the gross, dense levels of the physiology. Okay, so what we're doing in today's healing session is we're going in to this activation of the deep levels of the nervous system. And as we do that, it starts to bring the integration up into the more abstract levels of intelligence processing or information processing. So that means from these deep levels up, it starts to come up into the emotional level. Remember, when we talk emotional body or emotional level, we're talking limbic system. So it's bringing up the integration of being, which is so much bigger. It's so big. It's so much bigger than any toxins. It's so much more profound. It can tweak those energy signatures in a heartbeat. The heart does it. The heart produces those impulses that activate the body's autonomic nervous system. The intelligence of the heart comes up into the brainstem, and the autonomic nervous system, the parts of the nervous system or the parts of the physiology which are responsible for eliminating toxins, are then activated, are now activated in a way that they weren't before, with confidence. The energy signature of the toxins dampened down your personal field of consciousness, the areas that have the confidence and the resources and the capability to eliminate the toxins. So in other words, the part of the body that was dampened down by the toxins was the very part that gets rid of the toxins. So what's happening in this healing is the reawakening or activation of the part of the physiology responsible for eliminating the toxins. That happens. And as that happens, the body is set up, the foundation is set for those toxins to be eliminated once and for all, for everybody, for all of us. We are exposed to toxins constantly. Viruses and bacteria and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of molds and all kinds of stuff are around us all the time. And just letting that settle. The heart, again, there's this nice, core energy in the heart right there. It's just going, yes, yes, yes. It's very nice. Let's look at some more questions. What have we got over here? The questions are so much fun. Is there a healing algorithm for integration of the dark energies in a way that supports evolution versus disease in the human body? Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you. Thank you from Idaho. I'm so glad you're here. Yes, the principle is that when the dark energies emerge, algorithm, step one, witness. That means how to witness. That question just came up. Awareness, breathe in through the nose. Okay, something is freaking me out and making me angry and upset. Step one, breathe through the nose. Let the air go back into the brainstem. This is going to bring awareness. It's going to center awareness or anchor awareness deep inside self. From there, we witness the situation. That's step number one, witness. Step number two, realize that the powerful emotions that you are feeling are required at this time in order to give you the energy to make a change. You need to shift something. Something in your world needs to shift and change. And that's why a situation has come up that has gotten the angry or upset feelings, anxiety, fear feelings going. Step 3, figure out what that is. What's that action step? And of course, it'll be different for every situation, right? But sometimes if you catch things early, the action step isn't really an on the surface action. It's not like, oh, I need to like move my car or something. It's more of an action step of, oh, I need to dissolve this belief. Oh, look, here's a belief that hasn't been serving me very well. Oh, the belief that it's my duty and my job, oh, to take care of everybody. Here's one I just found about 2 days ago. This was a great belief to get rid of. I had this belief that my desire is to live my dharma. That seems like a good belief, right? My desire is to live my dharma. And, oh, let's extend that. My desire is to support other people to live their dharma. Well, that seems like a perfectly innocent, like, that's a good enough belief. You shouldn't have to get rid of it. But guess what? What if, just by chance, I happen to have somebody in my environment who in their previous incarnations or in the spirit world was only with the angels, with the angels, with the angels. And then they came into this lifetime and their dharma is to explore their dark side. And because of their level of mental and emotional development, that means inflicting a lot of pain on other people. That's their dharma. Right now, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be inflicting pain on people. So is it really my job to like help them? You know, that's a question I had to ask. Suddenly I had to ask myself, wait a minute. So I have to kind of define my terms, right? We have to define our terms. So I'm just giving you that as an example, but see, we all have these little beliefs that sit inside, and we almost, you set up the belief, I'm going to live my dharma and I'm going to help other people. And then you just kind of forget about it, right? Because you figure that's a good belief. It can just roll on automatic for a while. Now that can just be on automatic. No. And then nature comes up and goes, no, it can't just be on automatic, because we have to understand that in this reality, there's a big range of dynamic expression of divinity. And so I had to make a decision at that point, whether it was more important to uphold dharma or to self-preserve. And I decided to self-preserve. But it's tricky, because sometimes that person is like a family member, right? Sometimes that person is somebody, not always, but it can happen that person is in a position where nature has locked you in sync with that person, because you're supposed to look at that lesson, or you're supposed to look at that belief. So then it's like, or somebody that you work with, say somebody at work, and you don't want to just like give up your job and give up your income, but you're dealing with this like very difficult personality, right? So interesting. Okay, here's another question. Lots of good questions coming in. Oh, I think there might be some questions here too. Oh yeah, oh, more great questions. Oh, lots of questions. We've got 15 minutes. Let's see if we can cover them all. This one from England, I was saving it. She says, so when one reaches their full potential in this lifetime, there is no further need to evolve? After no more expansion, does one go to an angel realm or realm of the heavens? That's a really good question. We kind of talked about that a little bit, didn't we? About how sometimes people just kind of want to stay over on that soft side of creation, but that's not Brahman. Brahman consumes everything. It's the fire that consumes everything in creation. It's like negativity. I eat negativity for breakfast. It's like, it's in Hollywood. All of Hollywood is built around this premise, right? Why is Hollywood built around this premise? Because it helps us en masse process the complexity of this lesson, because it's very tricky. It's confusing in the human condition to have a lesson with, how is it that I should be eating negativity for breakfast? Like, how is that? So yes, evolution never ends, because we live in an ever evolving universe that is evolving through our interaction with it. So the question is, when we've evolved to our full potential, how then do we leverage our full potential in order to interact with the environment in such a way as to promote the most graceful, beautiful, perfect evolution of the whole universe? Usually what souls do when they evolve to the point that they've kind of worked through all their own personal karma is they start serving the collective. But watch out for that desire to help other people live their dharma. Oh. But yes, so thank you. Such a beautiful question. And I've been thinking about this question because it came in a couple of days ago. So I kind of answered other bits and pieces of it through today's session, but it was a great question. Grateful. Okay, here's another question from Croatia. Can you, dear Dorothy, can you relate on Maharishi's sentence from the perspective of energy healing, that every second the whole universe is emerging and collapsing? Wow, that's a really profound question. From the perspective of energy healing, yes. So what we're doing in energy healing is we are expanding our, among other things, there are a lot of different things that energy healing does, but one of the principal things that energy healing does is it provides a kind of a roadmap for directing attention, right? Because the number one principle is we direct attention intelligently, but the second principle is where and how do we direct attention? So there's a roadmap. And the roadmap isn't created by me or you or individuals. A roadmap is divinity self-interacting. There's a pattern, there are laws of nature that are responsible for the way divine being, unmanifest, absolute being, folds in on its own nature and gives rise to an expansion of the entire material creation. And those are laws of nature. I mean, physics identifies those, a lot of those laws of nature as specific laws. And so, and you know, a very religious person could talk about them in terms of the will of God, I suppose. But the principle here is that that's not created by us, that's just created by divine nature. So one of the things we're doing in energy healing is we're looking at that model of how does infinite, unmanifest, silent totality self-interact in such a way as to give rise to the manifest creation. And then another part of energy healing is to look to the physiology, as we have in today's session, and I'm so grateful that you're with me, to see how the different systems and organs and functions in the physiology are literally expressions of that dynamic of consciousness folding in on itself to produce the creation. Does that make sense? Because when we understand the pattern, and you can go to my website and look up the term divine dialogue on the knowledge base, and there's like a whole description of that loop, right? That cycle of consciousness fold. Although there are a lot more elaborated forms of that. Like the entire Vedic literature is an elaborated form of that loop. Elaborating and self-commentating. It's a huge thing, really. Really, that loop of how consciousness folds on itself is, it's a lot that could be said about it. But what we're doing in energy healing is we're cultivating a flow of awareness that allows us to transcend the speech and get right into the essence of the experience of it. And so when we get into that essence of the experience of the way unmanifest manifests, then we start to understand it from a very visceral level. We start to live it. We see when something goes wrong somewhere in the body, that part of the body is expressing an area in that cycle where there's like a little blip, right? There's like some area where the consciousness isn't flowing in its beautiful divine circle form, its beautiful spherical form, which is how divinity likes to flow, right? Nature always takes the path of least action, right? And so a circular form has like, it's a very efficient form, right? But sometimes in that loop, which is a kind of a circle, there can be a little stress in there because that area needs to integrate divinity in order for us to live our full potential. So from the angle of energy healing, we focus our attention in there, and the part of the body that falls ill will tell you by its nature, the part of the divine dialogue that it represents. It will tell you what's wrong and where to focus your attention. So the symptom itself becomes the key to understanding where and how to focus attention. I hope that makes sense. That was an awesome question, wasn't it? Yeah, they said it was awesome. It was awesome. Oh, well, you guys, that's because we're a team. Me and my Croatian sister are a team. Thank you. I love you. Yeah, and nature, right? Divine being through both of us at the same time. Okay, here's another beautiful sister, my Swedish sister. Dear Dorothy, if there's time, can we do healing for those negative beliefs of fear of death that our society has? There's so much suffering around our own death, and one of our dear ones. Thank you. Oh, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, and I really appreciate that you asked this question, by the way, because we have hospice workers who join us regularly for these webinars, and they have, one of their job, basically, as they see it, as they've communicated to me, is to help our whole society gain a much richer understanding of the death process and see it as actually an expression of the evolution of life. Essentially, it's not really, I mean, it's dropping the physical body, but it certainly is inclusive of the evolutionary process. And so shifting our awareness when death comes from the fact that we're losing something, it's like seeing the glass half full or half empty, right? Rather than seeing it as, oh, I'm losing my body and I'm losing my connection with my loved ones and all my things that I liked or whatever, my opportunity to give something to this world, to look at it in terms of having graduated and having an opportunity to move to a subtler level of expression where we can affect change in an even more dynamic and powerful way. I'm remembering this thing about the lady with the toxins, right? And how the stress came in up here so that there would be some nice integration of all her decades and decades of meditation to create a foundation down at the subtle level. It's a little bit like that. When we die, we lose the 4 dense levels, gone. So then we're left with this stuff here. And the physiology then takes on only general, there are always exceptions. There are always exceptions, right? We've all heard of ghosts, and a ghost would be someone who physical body gone, but then there's still etheric body is still there. That's why the ghost looks like the person. So, but those are fringe situations. The common experience is that the awareness drops the 4 denser layers and is just living more at the subtler level of creation. And a lot of people, most people, awareness drops all the way down into being, and they just take a long, luscious rest. In the East, they call it Maha Samadhi. Samadhi is taking awareness to the source of creation, but Maha Samadhi is like, like really in that silent, unmanifest source with no distractions. It's such bliss. I remember there was a quote from my teacher. He said that if people knew how pleasant it was to not be in the physical body, we would rejoice when people die. But we'd celebrate when people die, and then be sad when people were born. But we do just the opposite. Let's look out into the collective consciousness for a minute. Our beautiful healing collective, thank you for giving us an opportunity to do some healing for our world. which is really nice to do that as part of these live webinars every time. One of the things that I'm seeing as I'm looking out with the blessings of the brilliance of the light of your consciousness as well, is that the veil that sits between the living and the dead is, it has like clustered around it certain laws of nature that it's a boundary of sorts, right? So that means there's certain laws of nature that are creating like differences. They're like discriminating. There's a kind of discriminating laws of nature right there, that this is the world of the living, this is the world of the not living, like that. And what's happened is those laws of nature have attracted a certain amount of emotional content around that transition, because the transition has a dynamism associated with it. And certainly from both the perspective of birth and death, there are a lot of emotions connected, a lot of feelings connected. So there's this big field, looks like a big field or an ocean-like field of emotion that's also like enmeshed with the laws of nature that create the veil. And as I'm diving back into source with this vision and saying what could be done to clear away especially the fear. And the first thing that I notice is a huge heart activation of our group. And this is so beautiful because, as you know, we got a big wisdom download for our hearts this time that connected the wisdom of the heart with the wisdom, with cosmic wisdom. And that perspective, that cosmic perspective, allows one to view the transition in from more of a witnessing capacity without being gripped by the emotions. So that much, at least that much of the download which we got today, thank you for this question. We are getting to integrate now. Well, we will be continuing to integrate, just saying, as we go on with our day's activity later on. But it allows us to integrate that aspect of it, the aspect of being able to step back and witness, by giving it to others, by giving it into the collective consciousness. The other thing is, there are beliefs which are useless. The beliefs are based upon information that we bring in through our senses and analysis at a superficial level, that, for instance, when somebody dies, they're gone and I have no access to them. That's simply not true. When you have loved ones who've passed away, they're totally with you. They're totally, it's like when they drop the dense levels, it's as if the resonation of the soul bumps up several octaves. So instead of being ha, it's like I can't sing that high, but you get the idea. Instead of it being like a low, slow vibration that you need for the denser form, it goes to a very high vibration. But the thing about octaves is, for those of you who are not musicians, the thing about an octave is that it's the same note. If I play an A at 440 cycles per second, and then I play another A at 880 cycles per second, it's still an A. It's like an octave higher, but if you play them at the same time, they sound like the same note. So it's like that. It's like the hum vibration of that person's soul, that beautiful thing that I saw at the moment that my father passed away, right? I saw his soul, I saw the complete package, the seed that was that man's reality when he lived in his body. And that raised up and up and up to octaves, to octaves, to octaves, to octaves. And it's still resonating, it's still buzzing and humming out there at a very, very high frequency. And it's amazing to me after he had his long rest, that now he shares, I hope it's okay that I say this, Dad, but he's really helpful because his perspective is broad. It's very broad compared to my perspective. It's very big. It's cosmic like this. So, and it's not even as big as my own cosmic origins. It's only a part. It is literally, it has become a feature of my own stairway to my own cosmic reality. He's like, yeah, it's okay. You can say that. Okay. I love you. Love our staircase to our cosmic reality, right? And that's something, we're at our time. We have one more question. I'm reading this question, but it's really a fabulously well thought out and intelligent question. So I think because we're at our time, I'm not going to take it today. It's about the process of imagination. Oh, so I think what I'd like to do is let me look this question over, and I'm going to be forming some ideas for some new webinars. By the way, if anybody has ideas for new webinars, shoot your ideas over. If I use them, you will get free distance energy work sessions as a reward for me using your ideas, either for webinars or videos. I'm really happy to do that. I love you. I love taking your comments and suggestions. And if I use this question, because it's a really interesting question, for an upcoming webinar, I will let you know, and you can have some free energy remote healing sessions. So thank you. Okay, my dears, I'm so grateful for your presence here. We did some amazing work today. May the fires in California quickly finish, and we'll have to do some more, some upcoming webinars on our relationship with the 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth, because doing some webinars with so around those relationships, I think, is also going to be helpful. Everything ties us into our cosmic origins. Everything, every bit of energy healing work we do does that. So thank you all very much. I'm grateful for our time together. It was really exciting to be here with you. I had a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing you all again in about 3 weeks. Thank you. Bye.